So he said it clearly there is there's a big gap at the bottom of physics and science where we don't know what it is, we only know what it does. And that gap he's getting at is that there's a certain meaning of life that seems to exist, and we would even say must exist, that meaning science fails to give a reason for why that meaning exists. So science and physicalism, it fails to arrive to the or to give an account for why that meaning exists. And so then he basically turns his attention to Sean here, and let's see what Sean says.
Presumably, you believe in consciousness. I know some people don't. I've heard you talk about consciousness in a way that I'd be surprised if you took the sort of illusion route or or something that says that it literally doesn't exist. And yet, you're a physicalist. You think that there is this sort of field of stuff, of physical matter, even if we don't quite know what that is, that somehow bumps together in the right kind of way and then gives rise to something that isn't just like, a rock crumbling off a cliff or something, but is experience, famously, the redness of red, the taste of Coca-Cola, the sound of children's laughter, whatever it is. What is going on there in your view? What is giving rise, whatever it is? What is going on there in your view? What is giving rise to this sui generis, to use the same term that you did, thing in the universe called experience?
Okay, so before we listen, here's Sean. One last summary. So yeah, Alex, he really narrows down to there's the redness of red, the taste of Coca Cola, the view of rocks tumbling off a cliff, and he says that there's this just he labels it as experience, and I would probably modify that into uh, not just experience, but really it's just meaning. You could say consciousness. Really, I would ground all of it in what John Calvin says is knowledge of God and knowledge of self, and that's the knowledge of God and knowledge of self is the presupposition of consciousness, uh, and really, and that knowledge of God and knowledge of self is subject to uh, being either regenerate or unregenerate. And so if you're regenerate, your knowledge of God and self is founded on uh the Holy Spirit circumcising your heart, and you have pious religious affection toward God, and then you know yourself in relation to knowing God in that pious religious light. Likewise, if you're unregenerate, as Romans 1 says, you suppress the truth in unrighteousness, and you actually don't know God and you don't know yourself. So your self-consciousness in that sense, which is founded upon there's a Latin term for it. It's the sensus divinitatis, the sense of God, the sense of the divine. The knowledge of God and knowledge of self, which serves as the sort of foundation for your your um your self-consciousness, is actually a blindness. So you actually don't know your God or yourself. So you're still self-conscious, but you're not you don't know God or yourself truly. And so I would modify what Alex is saying from experience alone to a more to that. But nonetheless, Alex is saying what accounts for that. And we have to hear what Sean says next, because we can see that what Sean offers really shows the futility and the necessary nihilism, the pointlessness that comes from an atheistic physicalist worldview. And really what we're going to see Sean say, it's from such a seemingly intelligent person, it's just a very unintelligible answer that he gives. And it's really just, honestly, it's the the ideas that he's offering, they just seem to be so needed for throwing into the recycle bin, or really the trash bin, because we're not going to reuse them. It just, yeah, they're so obviously false that it's like when Dorothy goes in and she sees the Wizard of Oz finally behind the curtain. We've what we're seeing with what Sean's going to say is the smoke and mirrors are just obvious, and we see the Emperor of Oz, clearly for who he is behind the curtain, and um, it's just honestly breathtaking to see somebody who's so smart, seemingly as Sean, just double down on such a unintelligible philosophy that he does. So, and you'll see when I share this. And remember, the question is what accounts for these? Alex is asking what accounts for these amazing phenomena, and surely it's not just physical atoms rubbing together.
I don't think it's any different than tables and chairs. I think that experiences and conscious awareness of things is a set of vocabulary words that we use to describe collective behavior of particles and forces in the universe under the right circumstances. I can say that the table has a certain height, that it has a certain tensile strength, things like that. In the same way, I can say that this particular person is having an experience of seeing the redness of red. I literally see no gap there at all. This
Okay, so I'm going to reread to you what Sean just said. So Alex again struggles with the idea, or seems to struggle, that physicalism explains for the redness of red, the taste of Coca-Cola, the sound of children's laughter. I think I may have added that. And Alex asks, "What's going on?" And here's what Sean says: "I don't think it's any different than tables and chairs. And I think that experiences and conscious awareness of things is a set of vocabulary rules that we use to describe collective behavior of particles and forces of the universe under the right circumstances." Okay, so what he says is experiences and conscious awareness of things. So we put those in quotes: experiences and conscious awareness of things. Those two things in quotes are a set of vocabulary rules that we use to describe collective behavior of particles and forces of the universe. Okay, so what he's saying is all experience and all conscious awareness of things is only the collective behaviors of particles and forces of the universe under the right circumstances. And then let's continue with this quote and I'll show why it just fails. "I can say that the table has a certain height, that it has a certain tensile strength, things like that. In the same way, I can say this particular person is having an experience of seeing the redness of red. I literally see no gap there at all." So let's just see how this works. So Sean says he has two cats. I don't know if he has children. Uh, it says he was married. So what Sean is saying is seeing his this would be really sad. I would think seeing his two cats run out in the street and get run over, that's no different to him than cutting a cucumber, on the counter for his salad. And that's no different than the day he got married to his wife. And that's no different than the day he defended his PhD dissertation. And if Sean were to, God forbid, go out into the world and commit a crime, and let's say he murdered somebody. Let's say he made a terrible mistake and he murdered somebody, that would be no different than when he had cut the cucumber, when he had got married, when he had defended his PhD dissertation. That all those things are merely reducible to particles and forces in motion in certain relationships. I think if you really think through what Sean is saying, it just shows the objective futility that necessarily comes from the physicalist understanding and explanation of the world. He says himself that experiences, so like the experience of getting married, or the experience of committing murder, or the experience of seeing your cats get run over very sadly, all of those are only vocabulary rules that we use to describe behavior of particles and forces in motion, or forces of the universe under the right circumstances. So, like he can say the table has a certain height and it has a certain tensile strength. In the same way, he can say that a person is experiencing the redness of red, or Sean is getting arrested and getting a life sentence for committing murder, or he's seeing his cats die. So in the same way, and so really what you get at is the physicalist universe. It reduces all meaning to a nullity. Really, the all meaning is reduced to just the only meaning, which is atoms and neutrons and protons and subatomic particles, their interrelation. And so really it's all just making meaning one flat sort of scientifically derived and scientifically guided meaning, which really isn't a meaning. It's really a circular meaning.
This is just one of the sets of vocabulary words to describe what happens in the world at a higher level.
Yeah. I mean, you'll be familiar, of course, with the reasons why people are suspicious of this, but perhaps we can try to be specific and make it interesting. I mean, for a start, it seems as though I could give a complete description of the activities of a brain. I could describe the sort of electrochemical processes and the way that neurons fire and connect with each other and the brain regions and all that kind of stuff. And were it not that we already knew there was this thing called experience that sort of came along with that, I wouldn't expect or predict that there would be this thing that the philosophers called qualia, the redness of red. I would just predict that
Okay, so Alex is saying that if we remove the idea of experience or panpsychism, remember Alex is trying to use panpsychism as his grounding value for reality. So remove that grounding value that as an explanatory statement that gives an undergirding reason to all things. Remove that. He would say if we just had neurons and we just had science alone, it would fail to rise to the level of experience. It wouldn't really give an accounting for that.
there would be some atoms and neurons moving around and bumping into each other in various ways. It seems, in other words, that like a physicalist description of the brain would not predict, at least on its own, that there is this thing called experience that goes along with the neurons moving around in physical space. What do you think of that?
I don't see why not. I think that's just because you're not very good at predicting things, but neither am I because it's very, very complicated. I mean, we're literally trying to compare two things. One is a physicalist understanding of nature at its most fundamental, which, as we said, currently takes the form of some quantum mechanical theory of fields and particles and stuff like that, which is literally the best understood feature of all of science because we can absolutely make precision measurements. We can set things up. We can simplify things. We can get rid of all the complications. We can test things to 12 decimal places. And we can push our experiments well beyond our everyday realm of experience and we still get the right answer. And it's all beautiful, pristine. And it makes perfect sense. On the other hand,
Okay, so he says a lot there, but so I would say here that so Alex very correctly, he says that physicalism doesn't account for everything. There seems to be something else that physicalism is not accounting for. And that means that there must be a more comprehensive worldview that embraces both physicalism and whatever that gap is. And Alex is getting at the idea of panpsychism here.